Hi everybody, welcome to Conscious Conversations. I'm your host, Katie Augustyn. So I'm the founder of the Transformation Center, which is based in Westport, Connecticut. And at the center I have private sessions with shamanic healing, with coaching. We also have a variety of workshops and classes at the center because I just love hosting other practitioners so you can learn from them as well. We even have sound baths in the backyard during the nice weather, which are one of my personal favorites. We meet on Zoom as well, and every month we have a shamanic clinic the second Tuesday of each month. And so we're going to put up the slide with all the contact info there. And you can go on our website and check it out. There's a calendar of events. You can register for anything right online. And I also offer a free 30-minute consultation that you can check out. So just let me know. And I'm very excited that tonight my guest is Colin McPhillamy. Tell me.
Yeah, almost.
Almost got it.
We text the name, but it needs another rehearsal. It's McPhillamy.
McPhillamy. All right, Colin McPhillamy.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of Irish in there somewhere.
I have Irish ancestry.
I
yes,
think
do.
so.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to learn a little bit about that. But first, I'm going to read a little bit about Colin so you can get to know him. So Colin has been an actor for the past 40 years, and we're going to put up his slide that shows all of his contact info. Yeah, and he's worked on 4 continents. Mm-hmm. Which are the 4?
Europe, of course,
yeah.
obviously, because I'm from there, as you can probably tell. Here in the States, in Australasia, including New Zealand, and in China.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's that's everywhere. I don't know, this may be the first time that I'm actually have a guest that's an actor, so this is kind of different for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to be the novelty.
I know, right? So Colin has appeared on all these continents, in London's West End at the National Theatre there, which is quite prestigious, on Broadway, and at the regional centers as well. And about 10 years ago, this is also very interesting, following a lifelong interest, he began seriously studying and practicing astrology.
That's right.
How about that? And that's kind of really why he's here, not to talk about the acting so much.
Actors are to a penny, right? It's a commodity oversupplied by nature, actors.
Well,
plus I've been an actor for 40 years and none of your audience have ever heard of me.
Wow.
And isn't that wacky for an actor? And the reason is that most of my work has been on stage.
Oh, there you go.
Which I've had a great time. My life has been something between a holiday and a party. I've been from northern Scotland to southern Australia, and it's been a lot of fun. In fact, as an actor, stage actor, they pay you in fun, not so much in money.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, we were just talking before we started that the Westport Country Playhouse right here in Westport, Connecticut,
right.
And you actually were there.
I did 2 plays at Westport. The first one was Sedition, which was written by the playwright in residence, David Wiltzie.
I remember that.
You remember? Jeffrey DeMunn was in it.
I'm not sure if actually
Law and Order. Yeah, it was actually about President Wilson and the entry of the USA into World War I and the founding of the FBI.
Oh,
it was quite a cogent. Yeah, and the playwright's grandfather was of German extraction and teaching German in a university in the Midwest. And the consequences were, serious. Yeah. And then the other play was a farce called Scramble, which was about a golfing magazine. It was kind of quite
sounds like
silly.
Fun.
It was silly.
Yeah.
Colourful costumes, people coming in and out the wrong door, that kind of thing.
Okay, definitely a farce. Okay, yeah. Well, that's amazing. And then we're going to talk about the astrology thing because you started this center. Pleasantville Astrology.
Right.
That's in Westchester County.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
In Pleasantville.
Very much so. Yeah. I didn't want anybody to have to wonder where it was. Do you know what I mean? So the sign it says Pleasantville Astrology. I took an office downtown in the plaza.
That's
right
amazing.
there.
So do people come in person?
Well, that's what yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Sure, but we do it on Zoom as well. That's the wonderful thing about Zoom, isn't it?
Yes.
International, worldwide, all that.
Yes.
But my wife and I moved out of New York City 10 years ago.
Okay.
And we were both traveling a lot. We were still both working, but there's a bit less of that as we mature. So I started practicing as an astrologer really very quickly after I started studying it seriously. I knew something. I had met astrologers in my late 20s and my 30s. I'd had readings. I knew something.
What was it that drew you to it? Because you said you had an interest in it for a long time.
Sure. As a young child, I mean, like 5 or 6, I really became fascinated with astronomy and the planets, and I learnt some basics about the solar system and so on and so forth. In those days, it was generally thought that the planet Jupiter had 13 moons. Now it's known to have more than 60. So astronomy has hugely developed since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then the thing was that when I was about 11, I realized that I just didn't have the mathematical talent or the understanding of physics to really pursue it seriously. And then I also got this kind of vocational call to become an actor. And I find now, in sort of hindsight, that there are all kinds of correspondences between these two fields of activity.
Really?
I think so.
Okay.
And then when I was 21, I just graduated acting school in London. So I went to see a psychic, and she said, the first thing she said was, "Welcome to the entertainment community." And I thought, how did you know? How did you know that? Yeah. Anyway, we talked, and somewhere into the conversation she said, "There's something else for you to do after you've been an actor." So I said, "What's that?" And she said, "I'm not going to tell you."
Oh my goodness.
At which point, of course, I should have asked for my money back and left. But it was a brilliant answer because it kind of got me, alert for other things. And I've tried all kinds of the usual things that actors do. I've been a waiter, of course I have. I've been in network marketing more than once. I've independent film. I've sold garden gnomes. I've tried them all. But I've been very lucky. I've worked fairly constantly as an actor, which has been great. And then, the technical astrological term would be around the time of my second progressed lunation.
Ooh.
Right?
Ooh. What does that mean?
I woke up one morning and I went, oh, it's astrology. And it had been sort of, echoing in my mind for some years previously. So I thought, well, I've got to do something about this. So I looked around and I found, really by chance, I knew nothing about her. I was here in the States, and I found a British astrologer and booked a reading with her online. And she was, she was very impressive. Her name is Claire Martin, and she's the author of 4 or 5 books. And she actually does a whole, foundation course for people who are complete beginners, right through to some really quite sophisticated stuff. Anyway, we got on very well, and I said, well, I'm thinking about, becoming a practicing astrologer. And she said these words. She said, "It's not nothing to study astrology." And since that time, those words have echoed in my mind many times.
Very true.
She's absolutely right. And I find now that the more I study, the less I know.
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, what I was thinking when you said that was, well, it's just, it feels endless. Like there's so much. It's literally.
Well, of course,
because of what it is.
That's right. I mean, that is symbolically correct because it's the study of the universe, which, as we know, is, well, for our purposes, completely infinite. And I think it's not just one infinity; it's a series of infinities. There are sort of there are what's the word? Adjacent dimensions.
Okay.
The Zoroastrian phrase "as above, so below."
Yes.
So atomic structure. Kind of echoes molecular structure and those kinds of things.
Yes, fascinating.
And movement in the universe is spiralic, not circular, and so on. Planetary motion is spiralic, and the way that an embryo spins in the womb is a spiral. Describes a spiral, like the whirling dervishes.
Yeah, there's so much.
That's the symbology echoes at every level. Exactly. Yeah. And then a very strange thing happened. So I had done a little bit of study, but I got what I can only call a psychic download. And it was exactly like downloading a piece of software that you don't understand, and you spend years trying to work out how you use it. It was like that, and I confidently expect to be trying to figure it out for the rest of my life.
Well,
but,
some things aren't meant to be figured out, though.
Well, right, exactly. So I got this download, and just like with a piece of computer software that you download, I didn't really understand it, and I still don't. I'm absorbing it at the tissue level, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the thing was that I started practicing professionally within 3 months, which is ridiculous. I mean, but I said to Claire, who'd agreed to mentor me, which was very generous of her. I said, I'm thinking of offering readings. She said, yes, I think you should, which was unusual. She said, even a very little astrology can be helpful to people. Okay. And she said, so I did. I started, and in the early days, people would say, well, how long have you been doing this? And I'd say, 3-4 months. And for some extraordinary reason, they seemed to lose confidence. So
imagine that.
Well, yeah. So the next time I was asked, I said, 3 or 4 lifetimes I studied with Claudius Ptolemy in Babylon, and that seemed to work.
There you go.
So I kept it. That's my story.
I love that.
And I think it may not be completely untruthful. Who knows?
I was just about to say, I think it definitely has a germ of truth.
It's got a chance, right?
That's why you got the download.
My great-grandmother was born in St. John's, New Brunswick in Canada. She was a second-generation Scots immigrant. And when she was 16, she wrote a play satirizing the notable people of the town. And it was a huge hit. And then opinion turned against her. She had to leave town. She went to Boston to study fine art. She was sent there. She married a man significantly older than herself. They moved to New York. He died. She had a small inheritance, and she became an actress.
Oh, my goodness.
And she acted for 10 years in New York on Broadway. And then she sailed to Australia under an acting contract in 2003. Within 2 years she was married, and she had 4 children, and the eldest was my grandmother. And the reason I mention all this is that she wrote 4 books, 3 of which are travel writing and autobiography. And in the chapter 1 of a book called 12 Milestones, on page 2, she gives a very concise paragraph, a precise and detailed description of her natal chart.
You're kidding.
No. So her birth year is given on Wikipedia as 1875. But if the chart is correct, that is a mistake, because that chart could not occur in 1875. It could occur in 1874. And it was put together by an astrologer called John Hazelrig. Remember that name, you don't often hear it, right? He was born in 1860, and he was an actor before he became an astrologer. And so I assume, I don't know this for a fact, that they met in the 1890s somewhere when she was working in theatre, and he was. And he was transitioning from acting to astrology.
So these are
my antecedents.
Ancestors, and so you come by it all naturally, the acting and the astrology.
Astrology, perhaps, who knows? Yeah, that's my story anyway. So since then, I continued, and I'm still acting. And now I do more astrology than acting, though. It's sort of flipping. And I've just in the last month, I've been blogging as an actor for 20 years, McPhillamy.com. But I started a long-form blog, or longer, for astrology. Okay. It's on Substack, which I really like as a platform. It's free,
Yeah, no, I think I subscribed to that, actually.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you're the one.
Well,
Excellent.
maybe we should put up your contact info again. Was it on the slide?
Well, my astrology site, Pleasurable Astrology, you can find it through there. There's a social media icons on the top right. And one of them is Substack, which will take you right there. If you're interested, it's really, what's fascinating is that astrology has exploded in the last couple of decades, partly because media is now democratic, anybody can produce anything, So there are all these astrologers opining about the planets on YouTube, some of whom are really fantastic. I follow 3 or 4 who are wonderful. So partly it's to join in. My point is to have a presence, that's available. And I am a writer as well, so it's natural, and I enjoy writing.
Yes, so you're just combining the two.
So I'm combining the two, but it's also my own personal exploration to sort of find out what I think. Do you know what I mean?
There you go.
Yeah, because to formulate and have a chance to. Yeah. So I actually just written a post about Ethel, my great-grandmother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with that
That's
story.
why it was top of mind.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So why do you feel that astrology is helpful for us? Like, why would I need to know this stuff?
Okay, great. Well, before I say specifically what I find useful, I think it's useful to realize that astrology is, for want of a better phrase, a broad church.
Yeah.
There are many applications of astrology. So there's what's called mundane astrology, from the Latin mundus, mondial, global astrology, world events. And so, as we all know, here in April 2025, we're in the middle of some considerable global turbulence. Well, this is not surprising to a mundane astrologer, because there's a cycle amongst the outer planets which has not occurred for 300 years. And there's a larger cycle which has not occurred for several thousand years. And there's an even larger cycle which hasn't occurred for 11,400 years. So, there's change has been predicted and is on the way, no question. So that's mundane astrology. There's also electional astrology. When's the best time to start a company, buy a house, get married?
And that's individual.
Going shopping. Well, you can apply it at any level.
Okay.
There's also evolutionary astrology. That is past and future lives. And then there's horary astrology. Where did I leave my car keys? Is this the right guy, the right girl for me? Those kinds of specific questions. And the astrology I practice is more about self-awareness. My view is that the aim of the way I work is to give the client agency. So we start with looking at the natal chart. What is the natal chart? It's a frozen moment of where all the planets were in the solar system at the very moment that you arrived here. Okay. So the fact is that where the planets are in the sky is the same for everybody on Earth at any given day. What makes the chart individual is the time and the place that you were born. And so, when one of the common criticisms of astrology is, there are more than 12 personalities and not every one of those personalities is going to have the same kind of day. Well, of course, that's true. But there's a lot more to it than that.
You mean the signs?
Yes, I mean, that's, should not be taken seriously. It's fun. This is a great day to go shopping. Watch the plastic. Fair enough, fine.
That's good advice anyway, right?
Yeah, right. But, I mean, there are so many things involved. There are 10 planets that most astrologers work with. Some work with more. There are 12 houses and 12 signs. If you multiply those, you get 1,440.
Wow.
So there are lots of possible variations, obviously. So I think returning to what use is it? Mm-hmm. Yes, it can tell you, this looks like a good time to start a new venture. But I think it's also important, certainly the way I work, I very much shy away from prediction, but I'm happy to forecast. So there's a very significant difference, obviously. These 3 months look terrific for doing research into what you're planning to do next year. And this is how you could go about it. And why? Because naturally you have these kinds of dispositions. You're happy to research, you love to communicate, those kinds of things. Yeah, and even when there are challenges, which are, of course, what is life without challenge? We all have them. How can you navigate? What are the opportunities? Has this kind of thing happened before? Because, of course, everything is cyclic. So I think really the aim is to empower the client by witnessing, where they are and who they are too. Also,
well,
does that make sense?
I think it does. It gives you, or gives one, like a greater level of self-awareness to begin with? It's like the starting point?
I certainly think it can, do you know? I mean, in my own case, so for example, I often, no matter how hard I try, I make very silly grammatical mistakes in emails, and I'm aware of this. What's the astrological explanation? I'll tell you. It's because Mercury, which deals with communication of all forms, verbal, non-verbal, writing, teaching, learning, and so it rules, you know, email communication, in my chart is in sextile to Neptune. Well, Neptune is the great dissolver. It's the misty, elusive planet, and the energies that are mysterious. So with those two, you know, so Mercury goes, "Oh, just dash this off," and Neptune goes, "Yeah, you think? Good luck with that."
Let's just cloud it up a little bit here.
Yeah, that's right. Make it misty, you know.
Okay. So that's helpful for you.
In fact, I can give you an example of the effect of Mercury retrograde.
Yes.
It's direct now as we're speaking, but when it goes retrograde and then turns direct, it has to recover what's called the shadow period. So to get back to where it was when it went backwards.
Okay.
Of course, it doesn't really go
backwards.
backwards. You know, even an astrologer knows that.
Can you explain it though?
Well,
People who...
it's an optical illusion. It's like the analogy is if you're on a train and another train comes along, you're both moving forward, but you're moving faster. The train appears to go backwards.
Looks
right?
like you're going backwards.
So I have an offer for your viewers, which is if anybody would like an astrological reading. Oh, perhaps I should look. Where should I look?
Oh,
There?
you
I'll
can look at
there.
that camera.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never had an astrological reading, and perhaps you're curious, here's an opportunity. Full retail is $150. Why is it as much as that? Because it takes a couple of hours to prepare a chart thoroughly, and we spend an hour together. And I have rent to pay because there's a real office. So I'd like to offer you a 33% discount for $100. Come and have a reading if you're interested. This is what you do. You go to pleasantvilleastrology.com and you book a time. And then on the payment page, you enter the discount code. Now, this is where Mercury retrograde comes in. I can't remember what the code is. I have an idea. I know that the word is conscious. And then it's the number either 50 for a $50 discount or 30 for a 33% discount. So if you try both of those, one of them will work. That's Mercury retrograde. That's my Neptune Mercury sextile. So there it is.
That's great, Colin. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and that could be in person or on Zoom, either way.
Yes, totally. The one thing I don't do is record. I do record the sessions if people are interested, but I don't send a recording. I find that in common with even very experienced astrologers, that the chart only comes alive when you meet the person. And why is that? It's because there are so many possible expressions of each of the planetary energies that it's really, at my level of practice and expertise, you know, I much prefer to meet someone on Zoom or in person and take it from there, you know.
Yeah, no.
We work it out together.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So when you do a chart for someone, is it pretty much like, do you start in the same place in terms of what like you do the natal chart and then from there you...
We look at some of the features in the chart. Yeah. I mean, the big three features in the chart are your sun sign, which almost everybody knows.
Right.
The moon. Fewer people know where their moon is.
Uh-huh.
The moon is, of course, tremendously important.
Yes.
And the rising sign, also known as the ascendant. Right. And that relates to the precision of the individual, because if you're born in, say, the Northern Hemisphere, if at the moment of your birth you had faced the equator and then turned to your left, the sign of the zodiac coming over the horizon is your rising sign. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So any one of those components is a great place to start. And, you know, I ask a lot of questions. You know, I like to check in with people. Does that make sense? They go, no, I want my money back. I go, okay, fine. Or they say, how'd you get that? Usually somewhere in the middle. And then we try to tease out the meanings, you know, and sometimes there can be extraordinary resonance and other times less so. It doesn't work for everyone. In fact, there's a very distinguished American astrologer, Stephen Forrest, who says that as many as 3% of the general public would not resonate to astrology, and that's okay. There's plenty of modalities out there which are fascinating, like your practice, of course.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
So why do you think it is that in our culture that we only focus on the sun sign?
Well, I think historically the reason is that by the 17th century, astrological practice had really degenerated for several reasons. First of all, the scientific paradigm was changing and shifting. Galileo, Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, all these astronomers were also astrologers, that they had an intuitive relationship with the planets. Of course, when Newton was born in 1642, he and his work gave us engineering, calculus, several other goods. And there's an apocryphal story that the astronomer Halley said to Newton something like, astrology is nonsense, and Newton said something like, well, I've studied it and you haven't, kind of thing. That is kind of apocryphal, I think. But the thing is that it really fell out of favor for several reasons. Also politically, it was manipulated badly by the Roman emperors, certain of the church, the ecclesiastical people, and general politics. The most famous, I would say, celebrity astrologer of the last millennium was a British man called William Lilly. And he's very famous for having A, predicted the Great Fire of London, and B, located some stolen fish.
How about that?
Right. And he used to advise both sides of the British Civil War on who would win.
Oh.
Yeah. He was imprisoned 3 times, but he died in old age, so he kind of made it. But he did a great deal to restore the integrity of the practice. And it really wasn't until the late 18th century, with the discovery of Uranus, that it began to come back into popularity. And then 100 years later, there was a man called Alan Leo, and he wrote and published, or was offered to publish, the first sun sign columns. And so that was the beginning of the popularity of that.
Like in the newspaper?
I think, yeah. So there's, they're fun to read and so on.
Yeah.
But in the 20th century, there are 3 notable American women who really kept the thing alive. The first was Evangeline Adams. Oh, she was an extraordinary woman. And she ran a mail order business, sending astrological readings all over the country, and at one time she had 50 people working for her.
That's quite an operation. Yeah. We only have, I think, a couple of minutes left.
All right.
But quickly, you can tell us the other 2.
Oh, the other 2, okay. Isabel Hickey was one. She worked in Boston in the 60s, I think that was true.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. And the third that I would nominate, there are others, of course, was a woman called Liz Green. And she's absolutely extraordinary. She was thinking of becoming a set designer, theatrical set designer. And she met Isabel Hickey, who gave her a reading which kind of blew her away, and she was impressed and started to study with Isabel. And Isabel suddenly said, I never want to see you again. Do not return here. Yes. And of course, Liz, with her temperament, took the bit between that. I will learn astrology. There was few people to teach her. She's been incredibly influential in the development of psychological understanding in astrology, because she is a Jungian analyst as well.
Okay.
And she writes books about as quickly as you can read them.
That's amazing.
But in 1977, she published a book called Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil. And that was incredibly influential, because in traditional medieval astrology, Saturn is known as the greater malefic. Sort of bad luck planet.
Right.
Now we have a completely different view about it.
There's so much here. We could talk forever.
Oh,
feeling.
well,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much, Casey, for inviting me.
Really interesting. So you can contact Colin and take him up on his offer.
Yeah, Conscious 50, but maybe it's Conscious 30. It's one of the 2.
What about Conscious 33?
Oh, well, that's the discount.
Well, see, could be. Anyway, it works out. Thank you so much to our viewers for being here. Thank you to the Westport Library for hosting us, and we'll see you the next time on Conscious Conversations. Namaste.